That's great. She's here today to help explain it. But this really all started, the idea came, and I'm reading from a letter from Betty Mueller, written long ago. The Jefferson Heritage and Landmarks Society began this project in 1984 to record information about Jefferson County burials. And the project was, first of all, to start with the small family plats and plots, and then to make a permanent listing of names and dates, and later the project went on to include even larger cemeteries. And Betty says here in her little introduction that the idea was to get these small cemeteries recorded before there was further neglect, plows, bulldozers, and to make research available. So Nadine and I volunteered from the Kiewit Historical Society to do Rock Township. There were 7 townships back in those days, the early 1980s. And my father came from a family that had a funeral business since 1880. And he and his brother Arthur had been in the monument business since 1906. So he felt very confident knowing the Rock Township area. And he went with us on many little excursions and told us little things that sometimes were not obvious. We also had other folks help us, like Gus is now deceased, and Art Sort, Marie Jersey, Martin Nolan. I don't know if you know any of these people. They went with us into the woods and through the fields on little expeditions. There were folks who pointed out special little places: Newton Kohler, Nicole Duzan, Marion Biard, Warren Flantz, Martin Mall, John Baker, Ron Gibson, and then Doris Hopper, a geologist, Elizabeth Golterman, Randy, Steve, Jerry Garland, Nadine's husband, Jerry Slade. They all came, and as Betty says, they were anchored to this project. There were genealogical societies that had already done some of this work. I don't know if the names of the people from St. Louis would mean anything to anybody. Would you like it for the record? Anybody like to know all these names of previous people done work? And we sort of went over their work and incorporated it into our work, and we were always looking and trying to be accurate. Sometimes one name would be missed because it was on the side of the stone or the back of the stone, so we constantly tried to check and update. Our cutoff date, though, was December 31st, 1985. No recordings were made after that date, and the records were then brought to the DeSoto Public Library. It says here they entered on a computer, printed out. Rebecca Mayberry was responsible for hours of work, and Betty Olson, librarian, gave encouragement and help. And then it says that printout copies for genealogical research would be available in DeSoto and also at the Jefferson College History Center. And the burial records of 6 other Jefferson townships will be published as completed. So that's how this all began. We ran one news article, it's in 2 sections here, in 1990, telling probably our most sensational story about the murder of the Bonneker couple. Mr. Conert took us to the site and told us what his mother had said was seen in the neighborhood where the couple were killed and decapitated. I since have talked to the Bonneker family to try to find out just exactly what happened, because there were 2 stories. The jilted murder was what we heard, the Conert story, but there was another floating story of an itinerant worker in the community who came and disappeared. Now, the young lady that was killed, the 20-year-old wife, she was a glot, and her family would not talk about it, not even to the Bonnekers. So the story kind of ends there. Was it a jilted lover, or was it an itinerant worker who was passing through? We never got to the bottom of that. But the purpose, and that's what this article leads with, of course, because that's our most sensational story. But actually what we did was just to tell the work we're doing, and then we listed the cemeteries, and we asked folks to call us if they knew any other cemetery in Rock Township that we had missed. So we thought we'd done a pretty good job.
And in case we couldn't read, and a lot of stones we could read, we would always try to read it some way. This was one way we could, by taking rub.
Now, this is my father's idea because he was a monument man. And sometimes the family would say, I want the same type of writing, I want the same type of scroll work or daisies or whatever. And for him to reproduce it, he had to have this rubbing to take back to the shop to make copy. So We did that, and we started to carry a camera, and we started to take pictures. And now we have even a more sophisticated method, which Betty Olson's husband has come up with, of the shaving beam, and Dave has used, with outstanding success, to put shaving stone and rub it on kind of with plastic paddle, and then the cream stays in the indentations, and you can read it beautifully on photos. So things keep improving all the time. So our slideshow now is of all the different sites. There are about 33 that we went to in Township. It's a 15-year-old program, but Nadine and I were surprised at how much we remembered. So here we go. So much of this is very self-explanatory. That is Jefferson County, showing the 7 townships back in 1984, and this is just the one we were doing up here, Rock Township. And what we did was to start at Kimmswick. I think that's right about in here. A little out of focus, but that will clear up later. It's not the projector, it's the pictures problem. We started at Kimmswick and worked north to the Arnold area, and then west through the Seckman Valley to the Rock Creek area, and then back through Highway M, north and south of Antonia, Sulphur Springs, and back to Kimmswick. This is starting in Kimmswick. Move that over just a smidge, maybe. Yeah. This is the small little plot in Jefferson Square where Mr. Kim's wife here and his son are buried. Mr. Kim is buried in Switzerland. His wife, Wilhelmine.
Well, you can see some of the problems even with cutting on stone. Her name is spelled different on this stone than it is on her stone.
And here's Wilhelmina, an E-R and A. But this is the son of their son's stone, Ernest Peltzer, and the other one, of course, is his mother. Just the 2 burials there in Kimmswick. To the north of Kimmswick, Montebello Road, is the cemetery of St. Joseph Catholic Church, with this wonderful old oak tree. And Dr. Kirk, he was a doctor in Kimmswick, and we didn't take a picture of every stone. We just took pictures of certain places, certain people's stones that we thought were sort of important to this society and the Kimmswick Society. This was a very good doctor. And that's a stone of the woodman of the world. You see those, not particularly that stone, but stones with trees, trunks, branches, in lots of different cemeteries.
Kimmswick had a Woodman Hall, so there were lots of members of Woodmen of the World in the area.
That was like a fraternal?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, in Imperial, behind Jefferson County Lumber Yard, are these 2 cemeteries. It's a little confusing. This one is Kimmswick, right here, and then there is a grassy roadway. I think maybe we can get it just a little clearer. And this one over here is called Rauschenbach, although there are Rauschenbachs buried in the Kimmswick Cemetery. But anyway, the Kimmswick Cemetery is maintained by the city of Kimmswick. There it is on a different day. Try to focus a little bit. It's about an acre. Nadine's this tree.
That's a famous cherry tree. It's the 3rd oldest
Yes.
in the state of Missouri.
And important to the Kimmswick Historical Society is Captain Frederick Ziegler, who was in the Civil War, and the head of the Ziegler family that had a watch repair business in Kimmswick for years and years. Now, looking a little farther north, we're in the Rauschenbach Cemetery. The Rauschenbach family was in Kimmswick, and this is the last member that lived there, Eldon. And he has given us his flag from World War I when he was a soldier. And Eldon's deceased also. This is in Imperial, one little grave in a private yard. It's the small stone of Anna Naes, N-E-E-S. Probably a variation on the spelling of Naes.
It is. It was my
was,
grandfather's sister.
She was less than a year old, or approximately a year old, and this is just one stone there. Off Viola Drive, kind of in the bowling alley vicinity in Imperial. This is north on the ELM, up here by this barn, with new buildings back in the 1980s being built, but up. You can see this one stone. We're getting closer to it now. If you're looking for these flowers that Nadine always tried to find, daffodils or century plants. But this is a stone of John Balzer and John Ritter, with also the weeping willow, which was very often used. We don't have any history on these two people. There was the name Pitts, P-I-T-T-S or P-I-T-Z, also associated with this, but we don't exactly know why or how or who these two people were.
This is where you start to learn German, where you try to read what these say.
Yes, the G-E-S-T stands for gestorben, which means died. And the G-E-B would mean geboren, or born. And this is usually here rests in peace, or here rests in heaven, or something like that. This is the Waters Cemetery on Seckman Road on private property. There are about 8 or 9 graves here. The Waters family goes way back in our area, and Letitia Waters is buried here. She was the wife of George Washington Waters, who went to West Point, came at an early date to Jefferson County and became the county's surveyor. And they established their home on the Mississippi River bank where the Anheisers later located, just south of Kimmswick. But George Washington Waters is buried in Jefferson Barracks. Now, Dave might recognize this. This is the Bonneker site off Lyons Den Road. In the woods, only 2 graves. That's my father. And he's looking at these 2 grave sites here. One stone has been toppled down into here, and this is the other stone. This is Nadine, I believe.
It was broken, this stone was, but somebody tried to keep it together, repairing it with those metal bands.
And this is the story of the murdered couple, where it says up here that they rest in God through a murderer's hand, Josephine and Lewis. They died, born in the 1860s and died in the 1880s. She was 20 years old, so I guess it was about 1883 in January that the incident happened. And who did it, I don't think was ever really solved. There is another Bonneker stone there, but it was toppled over into the ditch. And this is the area where we had kind of gone down to get to the site off of Lyons Den Road. Now going west off Vogel Road onto Gary Road is this cemetery called Ulrich R. Gattesacker. And this sign mysteriously appeared at the door of the Kimmswick Historical Society one day, which we still have, and we don't know who brought it or why, but we have it. And here are the stones. This cemetery was not cared for at the time. There are Eddiners and Schwalberts buried. Now, Nadine and me, we have not been back to these in a long time. So this, remember, this is 1984 we're talking. And this is the Richardson Cemetery on Richardson Road. As a newer area, and then an older area here surrounded by a stone fence. One of Nadine's favorite stones, she called it her broken angel, is for our baby Ruth. 1919, the child died, and there's still little flowers there, but somebody broke the head off of the angel. And Williamson, have you noticed the birth date and the death date? Etta was 107 years old, and my father said that's absolutely correct. The lady was 107. So you put it down, and that's that.
He was 95.
Mm-hmm.
This little small rock enclosure, this was the Waters family, more of the Waters family.
Mm-hmm. Some of the stones were just lying against the stone enclosure.
After we showed the slideshow, somebody went in there and cleaned it all up.
Right.
Cut all the trees out.
Love the names, Eliza Lucy. And that's one we couldn't read. That's the rubbing that Nadine was holding up to show you. This is the old marble stones, and it almost totally fades out. But when you see the rubbing, you can tell that this is the stone of Freeman Waters and his dates and everything. There's my dad taking that rubbing. You get sidetracked once in a while because it's pretty out there, and you start taking pictures of flowers. Spirea, I don't know if it would maybe be a variation of a spirea. All kinds of little wildflowers here. But this is when Nadine is saying somebody got in there and cleaned it up, because this is the Cadwallader stone. Interesting, this is William Henry Harrison, Cadwallader. And the next time we went back, there is the same stone, and now you can see what was behind it. More stone, yes.
What cemetery is this?
Richardson,
Richardson.
on Richardson Road. I think the Boy Scouts got there.
There were a lot of stones just lying on the ground that they said were moved there. The people were not really buried there, but they were moved there when they were building Interstate 55. They ran through a small cemetery, and they didn't know what to do with the stone. Just brought them and laid them in there.
This is still Richardson. Now this is a picture from Highway 61, 67 at Arnold. There is a Highline Tower over here. There's now a subdivision in this area, but there was one burial there at that Highline of Stuber, S-T-E-U-B-E-R.
So the new Arnold City Hall is now.
Yes, through this area. It's across from George Dohek's property, and this is all subdivision area. And we went there one day. I remember Jerry went along on that one too, and I don't think we ever really found the stone. Jim says he had seen it on a hunting trip one time, but we got information from Mr. Dohek that it was a Stuber burial. This is St. John Lutheran Church. We used to call it Beck. Now it's Arnold. Mr. Wagner had a house and a wagon making business in Kinswick. And of course here are not only one weeping willow, but this whole row back here has weeping willows in different variations. So we started taking pictures of weeping willows. There's one, and another one, another design, another design.
All of these stones always had a Bible verse at the bottom. You can't read them in the old, but they all had a Bible verse.
Yeah, and this is here, Rest in God, at the top, and there's the Gestorben date. And another weeping willow. And these are marble stones. You can see how they deteriorate in the weather. This is not granite. And there I am making a rubbing. This is Herbie Hilmer, who used to be in charge, some of you know him, of the cemetery there. We're taking a rubbing. And Nadine is taking a rubbing. And this is a little bit of our equipment. To take those rubbings, you need all of this tissue type paper, and you need carbon paper, and carbon paper makes your hands blue and purple, so you need these sort of little tissues here. You've got to have paper and pencil, and you've got to have brushes to brush a little bit, and you've got to have binoculars, and camera, and off, and some hats, and of course the big thing, you need a Jeep. Once in a while you really need a Jeep to get where you want to go unless you want to really walk. Now this is not a good sight when you see this and there's a cemetery nearby, because this was the beginning of St. John's Crossing subdivision. This is right across the back of the St. John's Church. And under this tree there were some graves. And when we got there, there were only little footstones left. That was it. But Warren Flons told us these were Dornside graves, and he had the dates. And so today this area is not built on, it's just grass, but
It's
there's
the
no,
backyard of a home.
right, there's no trace of
There's
stones.
a house there on the ground.
Yeah, this is Immaculate Conception in Arnold. And the road that leads down through the cemetery. There are some priests' graves. And of course we recorded all of this, but we did not take pictures of every stone. This is an interesting, pretty stone for a child. This is the Baker Richardson Cemetery, or the Richardson Baker. This is off of Lone Dell, very close to Highway 61, 67 on a bluff, overlooking the Merrimack River. And Nadine is here, and Marion Biard, and the two men who are telling us about it. The cemetery has a Richardson's in it. This is John Richardson here, and some slave graves.
Today it's a subdivision, but they did keep the cemetery, but it's all houses.
Around it. And then Marion thought she knew where possibly some Indian graves were located. This is Marion Biard. So we went to this area off Ricks Road, but with an Indian grave you see, really nothing except a depression in the earth, or maybe does this look like a mound in the earth? It was just interesting. Now we're on East Rock Creek Road. We came to this site numerous times, and through this field and down into the woods was a little graveyard, family burials, called the Becker Schaffner Cemetery. Well, when we got there, there were no more Becker stones. There was only one stone left of a Mr. and Mrs. Schaffner. Her name was Catherine, I've forgotten his first name. But that stone was standing, and where the rest of the stones had gone, we don't know, and the people looked kind of, what would you say?
It took Gus a lot of talking.
Yes.
Gus Conert got us in there.
Yes.
It took Gus a lot of talking for that woman to let us on the property. She didn't want. A lot of the stones, I think, were used for gate posts. And
Sometimes stones were used as sidewalks. So, this is St. John's Catholic Church Cemetery, also known as the Rock Creek Cemetery. There are a lot of Bohemian people buried in here, and their stones are in the Bohemian language. Not the whole cemetery was cleaned back at that time, and Nadine was fearless. She just went right in there with all the chiggers and heat and everything. But that's the kind of recording you're supposed to do, and that's almost impossible. Once in a while you luck out, and on one stone it will be in English and Bohemian. So that's the word. Now squalor is the word. That's the original word. people who helped us find various little cemeteries. These iron crosses were in the cemetery, and they really should have all, as I think back, been photographed. I don't know how many of these would be left today.
But look how interesting they are down at the bottom, the skull and the crossbones.
And this stone in the same cemetery is the oldest birth date we found, May of 1787. But even with a rubbing, we could not figure out the name. So we're going to have to send Dave there. This is a challenge, but it's the oldest birth date we found. We found others in the 1700s, but nothing earlier than 1787. Now the Jeep stops for Osage orange trees. There I have one of them right there, and anytime we spied something interesting, we made it stop. Also, it stops for pretty leaves. This is the McCormick Cemetery. I believe this is Sugar Creek Road. Now we're getting to the western end of Rock Township, and I don't know, Nadine, we didn't know as much history about those places. This is the area, you're looking down to these mobile homes from some area here where some Sullens were buried, so the Sullens Cemetery. Just a few, looks like, in a side yard. And here, off of Highway 21, Country Club Manor was a new subdivision going up. And there, at the back of the subdivision on the hill, were some Yates, Y-A-T-E-S, Yates burials. Now, when we showed these to Frank Magre, he said, "Oh, there's a nut stone right here." So, there's a close-up of it. Is that a nut stone? Indians use those. Some people say to crack nuts. Some people say to cook eggs. I don't know. But that's me taking a picture of this Yates stone, and Nadine is taking a picture of me. And that's what I was trying to get, because there's another early date, 1799.
That cemetery's just about gone. I was there last year.
Just about gone.
Yeah, there's four-wheel trails right through the middle of it. It's everything's just about gone.
This is St. Paul Lutheran Church Cemetery at Otto. And this is the first cemetery that the Hylotags used. This is the first one and the only one who came over, born in 1817. But there's lots of things on stones, like you can see that he was born in Schladen, which was in the, not kingdom, but like little principality of Hanover in Germany. So those things are good for genealogists. And if you don't have all of your carbon paper and everything with you, my dad would whip out his billfold, and we sometimes take a make-do impression by rubbing the stone with a piece of paper and the leather off of a billfold. That's when you're really desperate. This is south of Antonia, down in the woods at the bottom of Rogers Hill or Snake Hill. There's a small Rogers Cemetery on private property. This is an interesting stone, Cornelius. Down here it says he drowned in Swashen Creek in 1872. I'm always wondering how the Joachim got to be Swashen. A few more stones. Rogers is sometimes spelled with a D, but that's not the way the family spells Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S. So sometimes the man who made the stone got it wrong. It was ordered incorrectly. My dad had also heard near the old Antonia one-room school there was a Myers farm, and there was thought to be some graves there, but we walked all over and we never found anything. Oh, there's a deer crossing the road just outside of Antonia. That was kind of exciting in 1985 to see a deer. Didn't see too many yet. We're at the Antonia Cemetery. This was laid out in 1880. First little grave in the cemetery. A child called Sophie, I believe. And I know a lot about this cemetery. All of my mother's people are buried here. This is my great-great-grandmother, Mary Kohler, and she's the one who gave the land for this cemetery. She was married to Judge Anton Yerger. And all the descendants, there are 4 generations here, and the 5th generation already has their plots, so there's a commitment to this cemetery. I mean, my mother's whole side of the house, her whole family history is here. There are 2 Civil War graves in this cemetery. A Corporal Frick from the 2nd Missouri Cavalry, I believe it is. And this man, Charles Reddick, R-E-T-T-I-C, from Wisconsin. And no one knows how a Wisconsin infantry soldier got here. I think these stones could go up at any time, though. You didn't have to be killed in a battle. I mean, whenever you died, you could have a government stone, I think. This is interesting and a long story here. The first row of the Antonia Cemetery has the Kinsel or the Kinsley graves, the parents and their 5 children. And 2 of these children, one had died in 1892 and 1895, but 3 of these children died on 3 successive days in 1904. And we're thinking it was diphtheria. Walter died on March the 13th, 1904. Elsie died March the 14th, 1904. And Carrie on March the 15th, 1904. What a tragedy. This is Burgess Cemetery. This is right next to St. Luke's United Church of Christ, which is right over there. And this was a private cemetery of the Burgess family, but now it's under the care of the church. This is Sanders Burgess, died 1855, which puts him back, and he was 61 years old, it says down here. So that means he was also born in the 1700s. So this is old. The Burgess graves are in this iron enclosure. This bunch of stones, no one knows. My grandmother, this was her church. She was born in 1888. She did not know who was buried in this enclosure or what that was there for. So we just don't know, but it's there. Very sophisticated weeping willow tree. And looking back through the cemetery down towards the minister's house and the church. And now behind us, if you turn around, this little area here with the pipes, this is a private family cemetery called Chouteau, the Chouteau Family Cemetery. This is another subdivision today, off of Highway M and Old Antonia Road. Does anybody remember the name of it? It was the Langhenny Farm. I can't remember the name of this. Is it Castlegate?
I think it is now.
Castlegate now? Okay. There was one stone here near the house of the Langhennys. And, as I say, today it's a subdivision.
But Elroy said there were more graves there.
Unmarked.
Mm.
He thought his grandfather's brother was buried there. This is in Moss Hollow. This is the Hookie farm and the Hookie house. And way up on top of this hill, right up here where I'm standing taking this picture, if you turned around, there is that tree. And 2 slaves were supposed to be buried there. But no name was known. It was just local history. This is Shepherd Hill Cemetery on Highway M. This is a relatively new cemetery, started in 1965 approximately by my Uncle Art Hylandtag. Nadine by herself recorded this cemetery, and there were 1,200 burials there in the
At
mid
that time,
in the
it's
mid-19th.
probably 4,000 there now.
This is down at Liguori, just south of Barnhart, on the old estate known as the Cedars. It's now Liguori. They're Redemptionist fathers, is that correct, Jim, there?
Yeah, redemptorist.
Redemptionists or something?
Redemptorist.
And we didn't record this because they are priest stones. I guess they could be recorded, there'd be no objection to doing that. But they're the stones of priests. We're at Sulphur Springs, looking at the Mississippi River over here, the railroad tracks, and up here on the hill in Virginia Walsh's garden are 2 more Burgess stones. Burgess family laid out Sulphur Springs, and these 2 are still here, Thomas and Elizabeth. Others, looking up through her garden into this area over here, there were a couple over here that were moved. You can kind of see depressions. They were moved a long time ago to the Burgess Cemetery next to St. Luke's. Now we're very close to Kingswood, just south above Hoppy's Marina, looking over the Mississippi. That is the Winslow-Zanus Cemetery. And Adolph Winslow-Zanus was quite a learned man. I don't really know, we have to do research on his expertise, but he was quite famous. Went out west, recorded things, whatever. Adolph Winslow-Zanus is here. It's on private property. Small cemetery.
That's Hoppy's Marina down below the boat dock.
And we're back to Kingswood. Jefferson Square and those 2 stones of Kim's wife and Kim's son. And that's the tour. Finished. Now, if anybody has any questions, Nadine and I will try to remember what we saw.